November 14th, 2024, 3:47 a.m. A deaf 8-year-old girl who has never spoken a single word in her entire life sits up in bed and screams. Not a murmur, not a whimper, a full, guttural scream that shatters the silence of a suburban Connecticut home like glass breaking in an empty cathedral. Her parents burst through the door to find Emma frozen, staring at nothing, her hands moving frantically in the air as if she's tracing invisible constellations. Tears stream down her face. Her lips form words she's never learned to speak, and then she grabs a pencil and begins to draw something that shouldn't exist, 3 days before the world discovers it. 3 days before NASA confirms it. 3 days before anyone knows the name 3I/Atlas. Before we continue, subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a warning that's been repeated for centuries. The first snow of the season had arrived early that year, blanketing the quiet town of Ridgemont in an unusual, heavy silence. The kind of silence that feels unnatural, the kind that makes you hold your breath without knowing why. Emma's house stood at the end of Maple Grove Road, a typical 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a wooden porch that creaked in the wind. But that night, something was different. The air itself felt charged, electric, as if the atmosphere was holding its breath alongside the sleeping town. Emma's mother, Sarah, had put her to bed at 8:30, just like every other night. Emma had eaten her dinner quietly, worked on a puzzle featuring farm animals, and gone to sleep without any signs of distress. She was a peaceful child, always had been. Born profoundly deaf due to a genetic condition, Emma communicated through sign language and had adapted beautifully to her silent world. She attended a specialized school, had friends, loved art class, and showed no signs of trauma or psychological disturbance. Until that night. When Sarah heard the scream, her first thought was that it was impossible. Emma couldn't scream. She'd never made a sound like that. Her vocal cords worked physiologically, but without the ability to hear her own voice, she'd never developed speech. The doctors had explained it years ago. Yet there it was, echoing through the hallway, a sound so primal and desperate that it made Sarah's blood run cold. She and her husband David reached Emma's room within seconds, slamming the door open to find their daughter sitting upright in bed, eyes wide open but unseeing, staring at the ceiling as if watching something move across it. Her small hands were raised, fingers tracing patterns in the air with meticulous precision, back and forth, circular motions, geometric shapes over and over. Sarah rushed to her side, grabbing Emma's shoulders gently. The girl's body was rigid, muscles tense, skin cold to the touch despite the warmth of the room. David turned on the bedside lamp, flooding the space with yellow light. Emma didn't blink, didn't acknowledge them. Her lips were moving, forming syllables, words that emerged as breathy whispers too faint to understand. Sarah tried to sign to her, asking what was wrong, asking if she was okay, but Emma didn't respond. It was as if she was somewhere else entirely, somewhere far away, somewhere terrifying. Then, just as suddenly as it began, Emma stopped. Her hands dropped to her lap, her eyes focused. She looked at her mother with an expression Sarah had never seen before. Not fear, not confusion, recognition, as if Emma was seeing her mother for the first time in years, or perhaps remembering her from another lifetime. Without a word, without a sign, Emma reached for the sketchbook on her nightstand, the one she used for school art projects. She flipped it open to a blank page, grabbed the pencil, and began to draw. What emerged on that paper over the next 17 minutes would change everything. Emma's hand moved with inhuman speed and precision, creating lines, curves, mathematical notations, and symbols that looked like a hybrid of ancient hieroglyphics and advanced calculus. Her parents watched in stunned silence as their 8-year-old daughter, who struggled with basic multiplication, filled page after page with complex astronomical diagrams, orbital paths, trajectory calculations, celestial coordinates written in a notation system neither Sarah nor David recognized. And at the center of it all, a single object drawn over and over with obsessive detail. A comet, an elongated nucleus, a tail streaming behind it, and beneath it, in handwriting that didn't look like Emma's usual childish scrawl, 3 words written in capital letters: "They are returning." David grabbed his phone and took photos of the drawings. His hands were shaking. Sarah tried again to communicate with Emma through sign language, but the girl ignored her completely, lost in whatever trance had overtaken her. More drawings, more symbols, more impossible mathematical equations. On the 5th page, Emma drew what looked like a star chart, with specific celestial bodies marked and labeled with coordinates. On the 6th page, she drew Earth, but it wasn't a simple circle. It was detailed, showing continental outlines, and there was a specific location marked with a red X, somewhere in the Middle East, somewhere ancient. The drawing session lasted until dawn. By the time the sun began to rise, casting pale grey light through Emma's bedroom window, she had filled 32 pages. Her fingers were cramped, the pencil worn down to a stub, and finally, mercifully, she stopped. She set down the pencil, looked up at her parents with exhausted eyes, and signed 3 words: "I remember everything." Sarah and David didn't sleep the rest of that night. They sat at the kitchen table, going through the drawings spread out before them like evidence at a crime scene. Neither of them had backgrounds in astronomy or advanced mathematics, but they didn't need to be experts to know that what they were looking at was impossible. These weren't the random doodles of a child's nightmare. These were precise, technical, intentional. David, a high school history teacher, recognized some of the symbols. They looked similar to ancient Sumerian cuneiform. Others resembled Egyptian hieroglyphs, but mixed in were modern mathematical operators, calculus notations, and what appeared to be computer code. The most disturbing part wasn't the technical complexity, it was the urgency. Every drawing had the same frantic energy, the same desperate quality, as if Emma was racing against time to get something down on paper before it disappeared from her mind. And that phrase, repeated on multiple pages in different languages, some of which Sarah and David didn't even recognize: "They are returning. We must remember. The cycle continues. Do not forget." At 7:30 a.m., Sarah called Emma's pediatrician. The receptionist said the earliest appointment available was next week. Sarah insisted it was an emergency. The receptionist, hearing the panic in Sarah's voice, agreed to squeeze them in at 10 a.m. David called his school to say he wouldn't be coming in. Neither of them mentioned what had happened. How could they? How do you explain that your deaf daughter woke up screaming and spent the night drawing astronomical charts 3 days before NASA would announce the discovery of an interstellar comet? Emma woke up at 8:15, came downstairs in her pajamas, and acted completely normal. She signed good morning to her parents, poured herself a bowl of cereal, and sat at the table eating as if nothing unusual had occurred. When Sarah asked her about the drawings, Emma looked confused. She signed back asking what drawings. Sarah brought the sketchbook to the table and showed her. Emma's face went pale. She stared at the pages, her small hands trembling, and then she signed something that made Sarah's blood freeze. "That's not my handwriting." Dr. Patricia Hayes had been a child psychologist for 23 years and thought she'd seen everything. Night terrors, sleepwalking, dissociative episodes, childhood trauma manifesting in complex ways. But when Sarah and David walked into her office that Tuesday morning, with 32 pages of drawings and a story about their deaf daughter screaming impossible things in the middle of the night, even Dr. Hayes felt the cold finger of something unexplainable trace down her spine. She examined the drawings carefully, spreading them across her desk in chronological order. Her expression shifted from professional concern to genuine bewilderment as she processed what she was seeing. Emma sat quietly in the corner of the office, playing with a set of building blocks, seemingly unaware of or uninterested in the conversation happening around her. Dr. Hayes had Emma's medical history in front of her. Normal development in every way except for the profound deafness. No history of seizures, no signs of psychosis, no trauma, no access to advanced educational materials beyond her second-grade curriculum. The girl couldn't even do long division yet, according to her school records. So how had she produced mathematical equations that Dr. Hayes, despite her PhD, couldn't begin to comprehend? The doctor took photographs of the drawings and told Sarah and David she wanted to consult with some colleagues, a neurologist, perhaps a specialist in childhood development disorders. She didn't say what she was really thinking, which was that she had no explanation for any of this, and it terrified her more than she was willing to admit. That afternoon, Dr. Hayes sent the photographs to her former college roommate, Dr. Jennifer Martinez, who worked as an astrophysicist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. The email was casual, framed as a curiosity. "Hey, Jen, weird case today. 8-year-old patient produced these drawings during what appears to be a dissociative episode. Any chance you recognize the astronomical notations?" "Probably nothing, but thought I'd ask." Doctor. Martinez opened the email during her lunch break, expecting to glance at some crude crayon drawings of stars and planets. What she saw instead made her choke on her coffee. The orbital trajectory in Emma's drawing matched, with 97% accuracy. The projected path of an object JPL had been tracking for the past 6 hours. An object that had only been flagged by their deep space monitoring system at 4:32 a.m. Eastern Time on November 14th. The same night Emma had her episode. The same object that wouldn't be publicly announced for another 48 hours while they confirmed the data. An interstellar comet entering our solar system at an unusual angle, with an anomalous velocity profile that didn't match any previous observations. They were going to call it 3I/Atlas, the third confirmed interstellar object ever detected. And somehow, impossibly, an 8-year-old deaf girl in Connecticut had drawn its exact trajectory before NASA had even finished their preliminary calculations. Dr. Martinez stared at her computer screen for a full minute, her heart pounding. She checked the metadata on the photographs taken that morning. She called Dr. Hayes immediately. "Patricia, where did you get these drawings? Who made them?" Dr. Hayes explained the situation. The little girl, the midnight episode, the screaming, the trance. Dr. Martinez was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. It was quieter, more careful. "Patricia, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't show these drawings to anyone else. Don't post them online. Don't talk about this outside your immediate family. And I need you to send me the original files, full resolution, as soon as possible. This isn't a joke. This is classified information that won't be public for 2 more days." The conversation that followed lasted 45 minutes. Dr. Hayes, sworn to patient confidentiality, wouldn't reveal Emma's full name or location, but she shared enough details for Dr. Martinez to understand the situation. A child with no access to telescopes, no knowledge of astronomy, no internet access in her bedroom, had somehow produced detailed technical drawings of an interstellar object that humanity had only just discovered. Dr. Martinez, for her part, shared something she wasn't supposed to share. The comet wasn't behaving normally. Its trajectory had micro-adjustments that didn't correspond to gravitational influences from known celestial bodies. It was almost as if it was being guided. The team at JPL was trying to determine if it was a natural phenomenon or something else, something they didn't have words for yet. When Sarah got the call from Dr. Hayes later that evening, requesting an urgent follow-up meeting and asking if she could bring a colleague from NASA, her first instinct was to refuse. This was getting too big, too strange, too dangerous. But David convinced her otherwise. If there's even a chance that Emma is connected to something real, we need to understand it. We need to know what's happening to our daughter. So they agreed. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning, 2 days away. 2 days that felt like an eternity. Meanwhile, Emma was changing. Subtly at first, then more noticeably, she stopped playing with her usual toys. She spent hours staring out her bedroom window, watching the sky even though she couldn't see the comet with the naked eye. Sarah found her one afternoon standing in the backyard, barefoot in the snow, head tilted back, tears streaming down her face. When Sarah asked what was wrong, Emma signed something that didn't make sense. "I remember the fire. I remember the water. I remember the waiting." Sarah brought her inside, wrapped her in a blanket, made her hot chocolate, but Emma remained distant, disconnected, as if part of her consciousness was somewhere else entirely. On November 16th, NASA made the official announcement. A new interstellar comet had been discovered, designated 3I/Atlas, entering our solar system from the direction of the constellation Draco. It would make its closest approach to Earth in approximately 4 months, passing within 80 million miles. Scientists were excited but cautious. Initial observations suggested unusual characteristics. More data was needed. The news spread quickly across social media, science forums, and mainstream outlets. Sarah and David watched the press conference from their living room, Emma sitting between them, and when the trajectory animation appeared on screen, matching exactly what Emma had drawn 3 days earlier, Sarah began to cry. That night, Emma drew again, but this time she was awake, fully conscious, and terrified. She sat at the kitchen table with her sketchbook, her small hands moving across the paper with desperate urgency. Sarah and David watched as new images emerged. Not just the comet anymore, people, hundreds of them, different time periods, different clothing, different faces, but all of them children, all of them drawing, all of them screaming, and beneath each figure, a date, some recent, some decades ago, some centuries ago. One drawing showed a young boy in ancient Roman clothing, scratching symbols into sand. The date beneath him read 79 AD, the location, Pompeii. Another showed a girl in medieval dress, drawing on parchment by candlelight. The date, 1347 AD, the location, Florence. Another showed a child in early 20th century clothing, frantically painting on a wall. The date, 1912 AD. The location, Southampton. Emma filled 12 pages with these historical figures, each one connected by a single thread. They had all drawn the same thing, the same comet, the same trajectory, the same message, and they had all done it before disasters struck, before the eruption of Vesuvius, before the Black Plague ravaged Europe, before the Titanic sank. A pattern emerging across centuries, a warning system operating through children who remembered things they shouldn't know. When Emma finished the last drawing, she looked up at her parents and signed 4 words that would haunt Sarah for the rest of her life. "We are the messengers." Dr. Jennifer Martinez arrived in Connecticut on Friday morning, accompanied by Dr. Alan Cross, a theoretical physicist specializing in anomalous celestial phenomena, and Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a NASA psychologist trained in handling extraordinary contact scenarios. They met at the Hayes residence because Dr. Hayes had offered her home as neutral ground, knowing that taking Emma to a government facility would traumatize both the child and her parents. The meeting was supposed to be informal, just a conversation, but the moment the 3 scientists saw Emma's complete collection of drawings, 78 pages now, spread across Dr. Hayes' dining room table, the atmosphere shifted from curious inquiry to something closer to archaeological discovery. Dr. Cross examined the mathematical notations with a jeweler's loupe, photographing each symbol, each equation, each strange hieroglyphic character. His hands were shaking slightly, something Dr. Martinez had never seen before. She'd known Alan for 8 years, worked with him on 3 major projects, and he was always the calm one, the skeptic, the scientist who demanded triple verification before accepting any unusual data. But now his face was pale, his eyes wide, and when he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "These equations, they're not wrong. They're not random. They're solving problems we haven't even formulated yet." This one here, it's predicting gravitational wave patterns that won't be measurable with our current technology for another decade. And this one, it's describing quantum entanglement on a cosmic scale. An 8-year-old didn't create this. This is knowledge from somewhere else. Dr. Tanaka sat with Emma, communicating through a sign language interpreter Dr. Hayes had arranged. The conversation was gentle, non-threatening, focused on making Emma comfortable. But even through the translation, the strangeness of Emma's responses was evident. When asked how she knew to draw the comet, Emma signed that she didn't know. She just remembered. When asked what she remembered, Emma struggled to explain. She signed about darkness, about cold, about traveling for a long time, about waiting for the right moment. When Dr. Tanaka asked if Emma remembered being someone else, the girl nodded immediately, then drew a quick sketch of a young woman in ancient clothing, standing on a cliff, watching the sky. Beneath it she wrote a name in shaky letters, Ariana, the year, 1064 AD. Dr. Martinez spent 2 hours cross-referencing Emma's drawings with historical records on her laptop, working alongside Sarah and David, who had become amateur researchers out of desperate necessity. What they discovered was horrifying in its consistency. Every date Emma had written corresponded to a documented historical disaster. 79 AD, Pompeii's destruction. 1347 AD, the beginning of the Black Death. 1912 AD, the Titanic's sinking. But there were others too. 1755 AD, the Lisbon earthquake. 1883 AD, Krakatoa's eruption. 1986 AD, Chernobyl. Each event had been preceded, according to obscure historical records and archaeological findings, by reports of children exhibiting strange behaviors. Children drawing symbols. Children speaking in languages they shouldn't know. Children claiming to remember past lives. Most of these reports had been dismissed as folklore, religious fervor, or mass hysteria, but now laid out in chronological order with Emma's drawings as the connecting thread, a pattern emerged that was impossible to ignore. Dr. Cross made a discovery that changed everything. He was examining one of Emma's more complex drawings, a spiral pattern with intersecting geometric shapes and mathematical annotations, when he recognized it. He'd seen this exact pattern before in a research paper published in 1997 by a French astrophysicist named Dr. Claire Beaumont. The paper had theorized about cyclical cosmic events, suggesting that certain celestial objects might follow predictable paths through the galaxy, returning to our solar system at regular intervals. The paper had been largely ignored by the scientific community, dismissed as speculative nonsense. Dr. Beaumont had died in a car accident in 2003, her research incomplete and unverified. But here, in an 8-year-old's notebook, was her central thesis diagram, reproduced with perfect accuracy, including corrections and additions that Dr. Beaumont had handwritten in the margins of her original manuscript. Corrections that had never been published. The implications were staggering. Either Emma had somehow accessed unpublished scientific documents from a deceased researcher's private papers, or she was accessing information through some other means entirely. Dr. Martinez contacted Dr. Beaumont's former colleague, Dr. Etienne Rousseau, now retired and living in Lyon, France. The conversation was brief but illuminating. Dr. Rousseau confirmed that Dr. Beaumont had been obsessed with the idea of cosmic memory, the notion that information could be transmitted across time through quantum entanglement or some unknown mechanism. She had collected hundreds of historical accounts of children exhibiting prophetic knowledge before disasters. She called them the Rememberers. Her research suggested they all shared common DNA markers, genetic traits that appeared in less than 0.001% of the population. She was close to publishing her findings when she died. Dr. Rousseau believed it wasn't an accident. That revelation hung in the air like smoke. Sarah and David exchanged glances across the table. Was Emma in danger? Was her ability, whatever it was, something that others knew about? Something that someone wanted to suppress? Dr. Tanaka tried to reassure them that there was no evidence of any conspiracy, that Dr. Beaumont's death had been thoroughly investigated and ruled accidental, but her words rang hollow. Everyone in that room knew they were dealing with something far beyond normal scientific inquiry. This was either the greatest discovery in human history or the beginning of something terrifying. Emma sat quietly throughout most of the meeting, drawing intermittently, responding to questions when asked, but otherwise seeming detached from the proceedings. But as the afternoon sun began to fade and shadows stretched across Dr. Hayes's dining room, Emma suddenly stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the darkening sky. The adults fell silent, watching her. Emma's hands began to move, signing slowly, deliberately. The interpreter translated, her voice faltering with each word. "It's not just a comet, it's a marker. They sent it ahead to find us, to find the ones who remember, the ones who carry the pattern. It's happened before. Many times, we always forget, but this time they're making sure we remember. This time, they're coming back." Dr. Martinez felt her skin prickle with goosebumps. She wanted to dismiss it as the imagination of a traumatized child, but everything about this case defied rational explanation. "Who's coming back, Emma? Who are they?" Emma turned from the window, her young face impossibly ancient, and signed 3 words that would launch the most intensive investigation in NASA's history: "Our first family." The next 48 hours transformed Sarah and David's home into an impromptu research station. With the parents' reluctant permission, Dr. Martinez arranged for additional equipment to be brought in. Computers, tablets, portable EEG machines, high-resolution cameras, and a direct encrypted link to JPL's observation data. Emma was not to be taken anywhere, not to be subjected to invasive testing, not to be treated as a lab specimen. Those were Sarah's non-negotiable terms. If the scientists wanted access to Emma, they would work within the family's boundaries. Dr. Martinez agreed without hesitation. She understood. This wasn't just scientific curiosity anymore. This was about protecting a child who might be connected to something vast and dangerous. Emma's episodes became more frequent, not violent or disturbing like the first one, but regular and predictable. Every night at exactly 3:47 a.m., she would sit up in bed and begin drawing. Sarah started sleeping in Emma's room, documenting everything with her phone's video camera. The drawings evolved, becoming more complex, more detailed, more explicit. Emma drew star maps showing the comet's approach, but she also drew something else, something following it, a larger object, geometric and artificial-looking, staying just out of range of Earth's current detection capabilities. She labeled it with a symbol that looked like 3 intersecting circles, and beneath it she wrote in multiple languages, including some that Dr. Cross couldn't identify. The Ark, Doctor. Gross worked around the clock, analyzing Emma's astronomical data and comparing it with JPL's latest observations. On November 19th, he made a breakthrough that he immediately classified under NASA's highest security protocols. Emma's drawings predicted a gravitational anomaly that JPL's instruments had just detected. The comet was creating a wake pattern inconsistent with its mass. Something larger was behind it, using it as a gravitational shield, hiding in its shadow. When Dr. Cross ran the calculations based on Emma's diagrams, the results suggested an object approximately 2 kilometers in diameter, moving at sublight speeds, on a trajectory that would bring it into high Earth orbit in exactly 112 days. March 11th, 2025. The date hit Dr. Martinez like a physical blow. She pulled up her historical research and cross-referenced it with Emma's timeline drawings. Every major disaster Emma had documented, every child prophet throughout history, had occurred when Earth was in a specific orbital position relative to the galactic center, an alignment that happened every 768 years. The last one was in 1257 AD, which corresponded to a massive volcanic eruption in Indonesia that caused global climate disruption. Before that was 489 AD, the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Before that was 279 BC, a series of earthquakes across the Mediterranean. The pattern went back thousands of years. And the next alignment, according to Emma's calculations, was March 11th, 2025, 112 days away. Dr. Tanaka conducted daily sessions with Emma, using hypnotic regression techniques approved for children, trying to access whatever memories Emma claimed to possess. The sessions were recorded and transcribed, and what emerged was a narrative so detailed and consistent that even the skeptical Dr. Hayes began to accept that something extraordinary was happening. Emma spoke through the interpreter about lives she'd lived before, dozens of them, hundreds possibly, always dying young, always female, always carrying the same purpose, to remember and to warn. She described a civilization that existed long before recorded human history, a global society that achieved technological sophistication far beyond our current level. She called them the first ones, our ancestors, the true ancestors of humanity. According to Emma's memories, the first ones knew they were facing extinction, a cosmic cataclysm they couldn't prevent. So they created a preservation system. They encoded their knowledge into human DNA, specifically into certain genetic lineages, creating children who would be born throughout history with the ability to access this stored information when needed. The trigger was celestial, tied to the return of an object the first one sent into deep space, carrying the complete archive of their civilization. Every 768 years, the object would return, activating the genetic memory in select children, warning humanity of its approach and preparing them for contact. Emma was one of those children, a rememberer, a genetic messenger carrying information across millennia. It sounded insane. It violated every principle of biology and physics, but the evidence was becoming overwhelming. Dr. Cross-verified that Emma's genetic profile, obtained with Sarah and David's permission through a simple cheek swab, contained anomalies, sequences that didn't match any known human population, markers that appeared to be artificially structured, like code embedded in her genome. When he ran the sequence through genetic databases, he found 17 other individuals worldwide with similar markers, all children under 10 years old, all exhibiting unusual abilities, savant syndrome, inexplicable knowledge, prophetic dreams. Dr. Martinez contacted them. 6 families in Japan, 4 in Egypt, 3 in Peru, 2 in Norway, 1 in South Africa, 1 in Brazil. Every single child had been drawing the same symbols as Emma. Every single child had predicted the comet's arrival. Every single child was now drawing countdown timers. 112 days, 111 days, 110 days. On November 23rd, Emma's behavior changed dramatically. She stopped eating solid food, accepting only water and liquids. She stopped sleeping entirely, staying awake for 72 hours straight, drawing continuously, producing hundreds of pages of technical diagrams that Dr. Cross described as instructions. Instructions for building a receiver, a communication device. Emma's drawings specified exact materials, precise measurements, quantum entangled components that shouldn't be possible with current technology. But when Dr. Cross showed the designs to engineers at JPL, they confirmed that theoretically it could work. It would require resources, funding, and components from various specialized facilities, but it could be built. The question was whether they should build it. Dr. Martinez called an emergency meeting with NASA's director and representatives from the Department of Defense. She presented everything: the drawings, the genetic data, the historical pattern, the gravitational anomaly, the countdown. The implications were clear. Either humanity was about to make first contact with an ancient intelligence that seeded our species millennia ago, or a group of genetically anomalous children was experiencing a shared psychotic break, coinciding with an interstellar comet's arrival. The former seemed impossible. The latter seemed statistically even more impossible. After 6 hours of deliberation, the decision was made. Build the receiver. prepare for contact, and keep it absolutely secret. If the public knew that NASA was taking seriously the prophetic drawings of 8-year-old children, the panic would be catastrophic. If the public knew that an artificial object was approaching Earth, hidden behind a comet, the panic would be worse. Construction began immediately at a secure facility in Nevada. Emma's designs were translated into engineering specifications by a team of scientists who were told only that they were working on an experimental communications satellite. None of them knew the true purpose. None of them knew about Emma. The timeline was aggressive. The device needed to be operational within 60 days to allow sufficient time for calibration before the object's arrival. Dr. Martinez stayed in Connecticut, monitoring Emma daily, documenting every new drawing, every new piece of information the child provided. Sarah and David, meanwhile, struggled to maintain some semblance of normal life. They kept Emma home from school, telling administrators she was ill. They stopped answering calls from concerned relatives. They lived in a bubble of secrecy and fear, watching their daughter transform day by day into something they didn't fully understand. On November 29th, Emma drew something new. A face. Humanoid, but not quite human. Large eyes, elongated skull, delicate features. Beneath it, she wrote a name. Ariana. But not just any Ariana. The same name she'd mentioned in her first interview with Dr. Tanaka, the name from 1064 AD, and beside the face, Emma wrote 3 words in English, perfectly spelled despite her second-grade education. This is me. December arrived with unusual weather patterns across the globe. Unexplained auroras appeared at latitudes where they shouldn't exist. Birds exhibited disoriented migration behaviors. Whale pods beached themselves on shores worldwide with no apparent cause. The media reported these as climate anomalies, but Dr. Martinez and her team knew better. The object behind the comet was affecting Earth's magnetic field. It was announcing itself, getting closer, preparing for something, and Emma was preparing too. Her countdown drawings now showed 79 days remaining. March 11th, approaching, like an inevitable collision with destiny. The receiver was completed on December 18th, 3 weeks ahead of schedule. It looked nothing like traditional radio telescopes or communication satellites. Based on Emma's specifications, it was a geometric array of crystalline components suspended in a quantum-isolated chamber, cooled to near absolute zero. The engineers who built it didn't understand how it worked, only that when activated, it produced measurable effects on space-time in a localized radius. Dr. Cross called it the most sophisticated piece of technology humanity had ever constructed, and it had been designed by an 8-year-old girl channeling information from an extinct civilization. The irony was not lost on anyone. On December 20th, Emma stopped drawing, completely. After producing over 400 pages of detailed technical information, prophetic warnings, and historical documentation, she simply stopped. She set down her pencil, looked at her parents, and signed, "It's finished." Now we wait. The waiting was excruciating. Sarah tried to return to some semblance of routine, making meals, doing laundry, pretending life was normal. David spent hours reading through Emma's drawings, trying to understand the full scope of what they revealed. Dr. Martinez and her team monitored the comet's approach, which was now visible through high-powered telescopes and tracking perfectly along Emma's predicted trajectory. And behind it, hidden in its gravitational shadow, was the object. The Ark, 2.3 kilometers in diameter, artificial, ancient, coming home. On January 8, 2025, with 62 days remaining, NASA made a decision that would change everything. They held a closed-door briefing for the President, the Joint Chiefs, and selected members of Congress. They revealed everything: the comet, the object, the children, the genetic markers, the historical pattern, the receiver, the implication that humanity might not be what we thought we were. That we might be the descendants of something older, something that left Earth long ago and was now returning. The response was predictable: disbelief, denial, demands for proof. Dr. Martinez provided the proof: genetic data, astronomical observations, Emma's impossible knowledge, the receiver that shouldn't work but did. By the end of the presentation, the room was silent. The President authorized full disclosure to the public, scheduled for February 1st, giving the government 3 weeks to prepare for the global reaction. The announcement was made on a cold Monday morning. The President spoke from the Oval Office, her words carefully scripted, her tone measured and calm. She explained that NASA had detected an artificial object approaching Earth, that it appeared to be ancient in origin, possibly millions of years old, and that there was evidence suggesting a connection to human DNA. She did not mention Emma specifically. She did not mention the other children. She spoke of scientific discovery, of humanity standing on the threshold of understanding our true origins, of the need for calm and unity. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Stock markets crashed. Religious leaders called emergency councils. Scientists demanded access to the data. Conspiracy theorists claimed vindication. And across the world, 17 children with unusual genetic markers sat in their homes, drawing the same image. A countdown timer, 38 days. Emma remained calm throughout the global upheaval. She watched news coverage with detached curiosity, as if observing events that didn't concern her personally. When reporters discovered her identity despite NASA's attempts at secrecy, camping outside her home with cameras and microphones, Emma simply stopped looking out the windows. She retreated into herself, spending hours in meditation-like states that Dr. Tanaka described as consciousness preparation. She was getting ready. They all were. The 17 children were mentally synchronizing, preparing to act as receivers for whatever message the Ark was bringing. On February 14th, with 25 days remaining, the Ark emerged from behind the comet, revealing itself fully to Earth's observation networks. The images captured by Hubble and other space telescopes showed an object of impossible geometry. Not a sphere or cylinder, but something more complex, fractal and organic-looking, covered in patterns that seemed to shift and reconfigure when observed. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. And it was broadcasting. Not in radio waves or any electromagnetic spectrum humanity normally used, but in gravitational pulses, ripples in space-time carrying information. The receiver in Nevada detected them immediately. Dr. Cross spent 72 hours translating the signals, working with Emma, who provided the decryption key through her drawings. What they discovered made everyone involved question the nature of reality itself. The message was simple but profound. We are you. You are us. We left to preserve what we could. We returned to restore what was lost. The children will remember. Through them we will teach you what you have forgotten. This is not invasion. This is reunion. This is homecoming. Do not fear. We are family. The broadcast repeated every 12 hours, always the same message, always in the same pattern. And the children began to change. Emma and the 16 others exhibited synchronized behaviors. They spoke in unison, despite being separated by oceans and continents. They drew identical images at identical times. They smiled when asked if they were afraid, and they signed in their various languages the same response. We remember now. We understand. We are becoming what we were always meant to be. On March 9th, with 2 days remaining, Emma asked her parents for permission to travel to Nevada, to be present at the receiver facility when the Ark arrived. Sarah wanted to refuse, wanted to keep her daughter safe at home, but Emma's eyes held something that looked like ancient wisdom and infinite patience. I have lived this moment 1,000 times, Emma signed. I have died young in every life, never seeing the completion of my purpose. This time is different. This time I will see them arrive. This time I will remember everything and finally rest. Sarah cried, but agreed. David held his daughter close and whispered that he loved her, that no matter what she became or what memories she carried, she would always be their Emma. The girl smiled and signed back. I know, and I will carry that love across every lifetime. March 11th, 2025. The facility in Nevada was crowded with scientists, military personnel, government officials, and 17 children with their families. Emma stood at the center of the receiver chamber, hand in hand with the other rememberers, forming a circle around the quantum array. Outside, the Ark had entered high Earth orbit, hanging in the sky like a second moon, visible to everyone on the planet's night side. Dr. Martinez monitored the receivers, Dr. Cross tracked the gravitational readings, and Dr. Tanaka stood beside Sarah and David, all of them holding their breath. At exactly 3:47 a.m., the Ark activated. Light poured from it. Not visible light, but something else, something that touched the mind directly. The receiver chamber glowed with impossible colors. The children began to speak in unison, their voices harmonizing in frequencies that shouldn't be audible, but somehow were. They spoke in languages dead for millennia, and languages that had never existed in written form. They spoke equations that solved fundamental physics problems. They spoke memories of cities that rose and fell before humans invented writing, and through them, the first ones spoke their final message. You are our children. We gave you this world and encoded within you the potential to exceed us. We left to explore the cosmos, but we always intended to return, to see what you had become, to share what we had learned. The darkness comes again, the cycle that destroyed us, but you are prepared now. Through the rememberers, through the pattern, through the DNA we wove into your species, you carry our knowledge, you carry our hope. Teach them, children of Earth. Teach them what you remember. And when the darkness comes, you will survive where we did not. You will continue the pattern. You will become the first ones for the next species, the next world, the next cycle. This is the gift. This is the purpose. This is why we returned. Emma collapsed first, then the others, all 17 children falling simultaneously as the light faded from the receiver chamber. Medical teams rushed forward, but Dr. Tanaka checked Emma's vitals and smiled through her tears. She's alive. They're all alive. And they're sleeping, really sleeping, for the first time in months. Sarah and David held their daughter as she breathed peacefully, her face relaxed, her burden finally shared with the world. The Ark remained in orbit for 72 hours, transmitting data continuously to every receiver on Earth. Technical specifications, historical records, scientific knowledge spanning millions of years of exploration, the complete archive of the first ones gifted to their descendants. Then, as quietly as it had arrived, it left, accelerating away from Earth at speeds that violated known physics, disappearing into the cosmic dark. Emma woke up 3 days later in her own bed in Connecticut. She opened her eyes, looked at her mother and signed, "Did I help? Did they hear?" Sarah nodded, crying and laughing simultaneously. "They heard, sweetheart. The whole world heard." Emma smiled and signed one last thing before closing her eyes and returning to the peaceful sleep of a normal 8-year-old child. Good. Now I can just be Emma again. But in laboratories worldwide, scientists were analyzing the data from the Ark. And in the sky, telescopes tracked the object as it disappeared toward the galactic rim. And in her sleep, Emma dreamed not of ancient civilizations or cosmic cycles, but of ordinary things, playgrounds and puppies and pizza. Because she had done her job, she had remembered when humanity needed her to remember, and now finally, mercifully, she could forget, at least until the next cycle, at least until the pattern called her again. 768 years from now, when another child would be born carrying the memories. When another Emma would wake up screaming in the night, when another message would arrive saying, "They are returning." But for now, for this moment, Emma was just a little girl, and that was enough.